Oakland Power BI user group. I'm Razarad, and with me I have like Indira on the call, and David is mute already, but he's on the call, and Layla, she couldn't make this call, but she is also helping with organizing. So four of us running this user group, and we have monthly events normally, these days like virtual, of course. Many of you joined from Oakland, which is great, and many of you joined from other places, which is even much better. Now, we have two speakers who actually came really long way from Milwaukee, and you know them by Power BI tips probably. If you have been doing anything with Power BI, they have a really fantastic website, lots of resources, lots of articles, links to many tools, and lots of layouts. They will explain how it would work, but all of those are free, so why not enjoying those information? So it's Mike and Seth. Hey guys.
Hello, thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
Welcome. Can you introduce yourself one by one, and then we'll go to presentation then?
For sure. Go ahead, Seth, kick it off.
Ooh, I get to kick it off. Sweet. My name is Seth Bauer. I am the Director of Business Intelligence at a company called Syndigo. My kind of foray into Power BI kind of started in the business. I went to IT, got into, was SQL guy, and then jumped into consulting. And right about that time I transitioned is when Power BI came out, and I kind of jumped in with both feet. So fell in love with the community, started up a local user group where I met Mike, and ever since then, been doing a bunch of blogging, speaking, tools for helping the business user develop Power BI reports, and just love continuing to do that, and kind of develop the relationship with Mike, and we do Power BI tips together. So.
Perfect.
Hello, everybody.
Thank you. Really appreciate that. And Mike, please.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Name's Mike Carlo. I am the other half of Power BI tips. So my background is mechanical engineering, and I quickly found out that I don't like building things. I like making things in computers, apparently. So I quickly jumped over to the analytics realm. I've been doing that for a number of years. I have an MBA, halfway through my master's in data science. So data things are what I love to do. Just fell in love. I was the quintessential shadow IT guy, working in the business, making things in Excel, causing a lot of headache for IT individuals. So I fell in love with Power Query. Power Query was my beginning to all this. Loved it. Thought this was a game changer for companies, and just started really researching and getting into it. About that time, Power BI Designer came out, and I just fell in love. I thought that this is really cool, and I would love to do this the rest of my life. So since that time, I have now I've been consulting for 3 years now, full circle, all in analytics, all doing Power BI related things. I started the website, Power BI Tips, in 2016. Seth joined on later on, and now we run that thing together. Tons of tools for the community. I think I was counting them up the other day. I think we have like 9 or 10 public-facing tools that you can use that all relate around like the Power BI space. So certainly love. Really enjoyed the Power BI space in general. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. So that's us.
Great. Thank you. Okay, I'll just do a bit of housekeeping things before you start. So
sure.
One thing for all of you who are attending this using Teams, if you want to see the slides, just right click on Mike's video feed and set pin, and then you'll see that video. Like full screen. Another thing is that if you have any questions, just feel free to write it in the chat window. Please keep your microphone muted, because otherwise this might create some noises and things like that. And yeah, feel free to write your questions over there. Indira will be monitoring the questions there, and then we'll pass it to Mike and Seth. For those of you joining us from other channels, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, just feel free to write your messages in whatever channel you are looking. I'll pass the information over here. So that's almost me.
Here we go.
Your stage.
All right, let's get going. So I'm going to start off with a couple fun questions, just kind of get some engagement from the audience. Feel free to chat these in the window. It may go fast. I'll try and pick up comments as we go along here. So as a person watching this presentation, what would you say you represent? Do you represent the business side of the world, or would you say you represent the IT space? So go ahead and throw a chat message in there. Throw a message which side you feel like. I got a couple business people showing up. Business. Oh yeah.
I think you cut out, Mike.
I think the mass muting was happening, and I've unmuted myself now, so I think we're good. Okay, so it looks like we've got a good split here between IT and business. Great, excellent. So in your business, where would you say you spend most of your time? Are you kind of spending time in the marketing department? Are you ops, or are you kind of what area of the business do you guys stick in? We have a couple people from finance. I love finance. Finance is great for Excel. Operations. Oh, fundraising. That sounds like a fun one. Ops and projects. Ooh, that's a good one. Portfolio management, procurement. We've got quite analytics teams, development teams, freelancers. Excellent. Well, we got a good survey of people here from all across the business. That's awesome. I think this talk is really going to be very relevant to you in any business area that you'll be in. So just out of curiosity, I'm going to skip all the way to number 4. How long do you think you've been using Power BI? So just put a number in the window. How many either years or months that you've been using? So I've been a solid, I think it's been around 5 years. So I'm a solid 5.
Hit the 5-year marker. Yeah.
It's almost got 10 years in there. I love it. 3 years. Oh, you got it? Yep, you got it. Excellent. So we've got a lot of 0 years, a couple newbies here. Great. Welcome to the crew. For those of you who are brand new, we appreciate you. We're glad you're here with us. For those of you who've been 3 and 4 years, you're our veterans. Thank you for joining. We appreciate it. Okay. Well, moving right along. So tonight we're going to talk about just Power BI reporting. This is kind of, Seth and I have been doing reporting in Power BI pretty much since it came out at the very beginning. We're just going to kind of talk through what does it mean and how do we go through our process around building just good reports. And we find a lot of this process, these steps are very repeatable, and we have found that if we don't really take our time on these initial steps here, that's kind of the first portion of the talk here. If we don't really spend our time here, we can end up with some really reports that maybe don't meet the need of the business, or reports that are not very actionable. So step number 1 when we build out a lot of reports is just to start with thinking about your audience. Identify who they are and what they need to be created for that audience participation. So who is this for? Is it an executive? Is this an analyst? Because the information I'm going to give to an analyst or an executive will be distinctly different. I'm going to be thinking about how they want to look at the report. So again, taking a very general survey of who's going to be looking at your report is a very good starting point. If we move on here to, here's kind of 3 general types that we've kind of found that you kind of fit in one of these buckets. So from the executive level, I'm a person who's going to be looking at a glance. I'm not going to do a lot of drilling. I'm not going to really dive into the data maybe very deeply. I may need a lot of KPIs, some graphs, but I'm looking for a dashboard or a report that's going to be very actionable. I just jump in. I can see where I need to take action, and I know I have to go talk to my ops team or my HR team or go talk to sales because we're down on sales. So executives are going to look for very different things. Then we move over to the analyst side. I feel like that's an area that I feel very comfortable in, especially as a report builder. So as a report builder, I feel very comfortable being the analyst, right? I like lots of charts. I like lots of graphs, clicking on things all over the page. That is where I feel comfortable. But I'm looking for insights. I'm looking for the answers in my data. And so to me, a report that's a bit more busy and has more insights on the page might make sense. And then we have the general audience. So general audience would be a lot of what I would call these just dashboards that are just going to tell a story or give you an insight about a particular thing. Everyone can relate right now because some of the the dashboards you're seeing right now is a lot of COVID dashboards. So people are reporting on their state, their country, trends on that. And we're looking at these larger trends. And it's kind of been interesting seeing like everywhere in the world, someone is coming up with their own spin on how they want the data to look or what they think is actionable on that data. So dashboards like that or reports like that would be more for the general audience. So moving forward through here, things we want to consider, right? So as we're talking about our audience, we want to be mindful of these 3 different groups, right? And we want to think about how long should they be in the report? You know, if it's an executive, he may not be there very long. He might just kind of be in, glance, and move on, or he may even be looking at it on his phone. So if we're having those kind of mindsets, we really want to be mindful of like, what is our engagement time with the report? That may change how we design things. Do they like to explore the data? I've definitely talked to some executives who are very data savvy and they want to see all the details. So they need many different pages of details that help them support what they're looking for or what they're trying to analyze. But I've also seen a lot of analysts who just like to explore the data. Give me tables and graphs all over the place so I can just kind of go explore and see what's in there as well. One of the key points here that we're looking through as we design reports is how can I use this data to drive a decision? And Seth will smile here at me on this one because he's for sure he's in that space right now. Is where we're working with a lot of individuals who just kind of come to us with an Excel sheet. Here's the Excel sheet. I've done some homework. I think this is what we want, and it's a graph and maybe there's a large table. And so really what we want to do is we want to start asking deeper questions around, you know, why do you need to see the data? What are we going to do with this data? And then what are the actions I'm going to take after seeing it? So if we think about those concepts, and especially if we look at the context of an audience, that definitely helps out how we shape and design the report for people. There's a couple other things here. You know, how comfortable are people with the data? So another design aspect here, if you're giving reports to people who've never seen the data before or not familiar with it, you may need explanations. You may need tooltips and helps to kind of help them shape the idea of the report. What is this chart telling me? What does the X and the Y graph portion of the graph mean? And how do I interpret it? So again, as you're thinking about how comfortable people are with the data, you may again actually add additional design or style elements to the report to help out with that. So here's our analyst level individual. This would be in our executive. This might be something that he would look at. He's got a nice big bar chart. It's kind of going up in trend. He has some high level things. He might be looking for things first at a glance. What's the first thing I look at in the morning? Is my trend up or down? He's looking for clear indicators. What I hear a lot and when I'm doing designs for dashboards at the executive level is it red? Is it green? Is it up or is it down? And so you can frame a lot of your questions about what you're going to be building in the report just based on those kind of 4 key things. You know, do I need to take action on it? If it's red, just show me the red things. Or, you know, are my sales going up or are they going down? Those are the kind of key indicators that I'm looking for at maybe at an executive level. Again, everyone's different. You're going to have to know your audience on these things, and that's why you ask these kind of questions to them. But you want to make sure that, you know, they're probably not interested in drilling too deep into the data, and they're looking for these high-level insights so they can fill their work with the day of making things, you know, positive. You know, we're going to make sure the sales goes up. We're going to make sure the supply chain is filled with supplies. So moving on to like the analyst individual. These are kind of general characteristics that I feel are fit very well with the analyst level. So an analyst would say, I need all the datas, you know, give me the tables. And what I typically find in a lot of these reports is there's tables all over the place of just information. When we're doing Power BI reports, we definitely want to push more towards the visual layer of things. And then if we're doing, you know, tables and lots of data dumps of information, maybe we're looking at other solutions like Analyze in Excel, or maybe we're also talking about paginated reports. So when we're talking about building great designed reports, we're also thinking about the entire tool spectrum. Finance team absolutely loves their Excel. You would be hard pressed to pull Excel out of the finance team's hands because it's just such a part of whatever they do. And so when you design a data model in Power BI, you can actually build the model in a way that enables Analyze in Excel. And you have to build the model slightly differently for that kind of audience. So again, making sure you have an analyst or you're talking to the finance team that, yes, they have to have their Excel. For sure, you want to think about that in the context of the analyst person. So another thing the analysts will be looking for is they want to look for their insights. they'll probably be doing a lot of filtering and reviewing the integrity of the data. A bar chart may look off. There may be a region on the US or in the world that is not selling as much as they would like. And they're probably going to filter down to that data and want to really drive into that area. And so in doing that, you want to build your report that lends itself to doing those kind of deeper analysis things. So multiple pages is a good idea. Using drill through, adding tooltips or report page tooltips are good suggestions in this area to help give additional context to whatever you're building on the report. All right, so general audience. This was a report that came out a little while ago. I believe this was the Gartner 2019, I think, presentation that Microsoft gave. Again, it was about opioid addiction and then different doctors and prescribing things, but it's kind of for general consumption. There's a couple things you can click on. There's a couple KPIs, but really it's just kind of a bunch of general information. Show me something fun or interesting about data. Tell me a story that I can relate to. That's really when we're talking about general audience for data pieces. So you'll see this in like their COVID dashboards or other generic publicly available data sets as well. Kind of a fun area to explore and have interesting facts found out about your data pieces. Okay, so on to my process. So how do we kind of walk through this and what do we do with the data set? So first thing I really want to do when I'm looking at a new data model or looking at things, I really want to understand what's going on in the data set. So often you'll find if you watched me build a report, my first step is to make a single page of a report, and I'll actually make it really large. So sometimes I'll see people cramming visuals in all over the report page, and I'll make the report page 150 pixels by like 200 or 300 pixels long. And I'll just start putting tables all over the place. And basically what this is doing, it's kind of like data profiling for me. So here's kind of a little simple example of this. I'll go to the product category table and I'll try and see what are all the values that we have here. What is my list price? What's the range of all my list prices? So I put a slicer out there. I can see the min and the max on a slicer. Looking at the product names here, I'm going to go through all the product names. Wow, how many do we have? What does that look like? And then I'll probably start enhancing things by saying, what is all the products and what are the models that we have and how many records in my data set account for those various records? So I do kind of a lot of data profiling for me because in order for me to build a good report for my report users, I really need to understand the data set. And a lot of the times, as the report developer, you're already very familiar with how everything will interact and work. So you're probably the most familiar that you're going to be with the data set. This is another step that I find that works really well. Often we'll talk to people who have either built reports and they're trying to clean them up and make them better, as well as people who just kind of don't know where to start. So this is a great technique that I like to use. I always want to think about developing like 3 to 5 questions, and you're going to try and answer those questions on the page of the report. And so the goal of this is, I want to think about similar topics. And so I think I had this in a future slide, but a lot of the times we'll get a group of people together and we'll just sit down and we'll talk about how do we do, like, what do we want to know about our data? We know we have some data. Again, if I'm coming in as a consultant and I'm asking people about what's going on, they know their data way better than I will ever know it because they've been spending years or months looking at their information. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to groom them down and to figure out what of the information do they have and how do we extract that out of them to get into reports. So we spitball ideas, we put them on Post-it notes, we put them on a wall. Any idea is a good idea. We just want to push people to keep developing good ideas. So of those pieces, once we have a bunch of ideas on the wall, we'll try and group them into like 3 to 5 questions and call that a topic, right? So you'll instantly find like there are KPI level things, high level details. What are my total company sales for the year? What are my total company sales for this month versus last month? There might be some very high level objectives that you're going to try and answer from a question standpoint. Those high level questions would be your overview page, high level information, kind of looking across the spectrum of the report or data set. But then we may get more specific. We may start asking questions about what are my best performing regions or what are my best performing products? Or there may be a bunch of, do we have enough materials to make our products? There's maybe a whole section of questions around that I'm going to try and answer that are specific to products. And when we think about this, we want to make like a logical connection to the overview page, but yet we may need a separate page that's only producing information around the products element. So we'll kind of peel that off and make it a separate page. Here's some more examples of that and some ways of how we would maybe potentially meet those objectives. What are my total sales year over year? I'd maybe choose a bar chart and try and give some kind of bar variance year over year. Regions are great in maps. I will say this, regions are great in maps if you have a lot of data. If you don't have a lot of data, maps aren't so hot because you have 2 countries showing up and nothing else there. So you kind of have to be very careful with what your data set looks like when you're going to invoke the mapping thing. Again, a lot of column charts or bar charts for figuring out which column of area is the most important area that we need to be looking at. Here's kind of, again, that process I was talking about. I do a lot of Post-it notes. We write down our ideas. We put them on a wall. Now we can do them virtually. We write on a whiteboard and put them all together on a page, and then we can group those ideas together. And then another step, right after we do the whole ideas piece, we like to don't get really stuck on building visuals right away. Often I'll sit down and even on like a piece of paper or on my Surface Book, I'll just get out the pen and I'll start doodling on the screen. It really helps to start thinking through like, okay, I have these 4 questions. Well, how do I answer those questions with the data? And this is where we really spend a lot of time thinking through like, is this best in a bar chart, a line chart? How's the data going to come in? Do we think there's going to be a lot of variance in the data or not? And so that's where we kind of sit down and we doodle. I literally like to doodle different visuals that I potentially would use in the report. And I think this is a real good formative process as you're trying to engage or walk across report that goes from nothing to something. You could really bring your audience along that journey as you kind of start talking about what's important, how do I drive action, and then we start putting out examples. Well, here's a good way of showing something over time. It's going to be a line chart. And then we start talking about what belongs on there and what should the colors be. That really prepares you a lot for what you're going to do later on when you actually get into the program and start building things in Power BI. And the last part here is you'll see some of the stuff that we talk about later. We get really fancy with some of the reports and all the cool stuff that we can do with it, with layouts and scrims, backgrounds, buttons, and everything you can get busy with. But that can eat up a lot of time as you build the report. So in these very early phases, when you're engaging with a business, a team, or you're trying to develop a report, it's helpful just to throw down a couple visuals, don't format them, just put them on a page and kind of say, here's the gist of what I'm thinking. What does this look like? Is this even doing what you want? And the reason we do this process is we try to redirect away from picking colors or picking all kinds of like, visual styly things, because often what you can get bogged down to very quickly is you're looking at the integrity of the data and you're looking at how the things look from a color standpoint, and we're not focusing on what is the actual message. What is the message we're trying to do with our data? So we really want to push our audience to focus on the message pieces. All right. So another kind of rule of thumb here is just to kind of keep it simple. Space on the page is your friend. You don't have to cram everything in there. So sometimes you've all seen reports or dashboards like this where the information is so dense, I can't even see anything. And I would highly recommend staying away from pie charts. Some people may have good use cases for them. I prefer to eat my pie rather than to see it on a page of a report. So I would much rather have nice bars. So bars for me, again, this is again from a very new report designer. I do use donut charts every so often, and it does make sense if I'm doing like a percent of something of 100%, right? I'm trying to fill a ring to get to 100%. It kind of adds a nice little minimal visual layer to something. But what I find, especially when I use pie charts and things, is the first ask you're going to get is, can I have a pie chart? You put one on there. The second question you're going to get is, can you label it? And then the third question is, well, I can't see the labels. Can you just put the numbers on the pie chart? So we've basically just taken a table, made lots of colors, and put labels and numbers on it. You're basically back to a bar chart anyways. You should just use bar charts. So sorry, that's my soapbox. I'm going to get off of that one for now. But keep your flow of idea moving. Keep it simple. Try and think about just clean visuals, and think about wasted data. Think about how you can use it. So if you see this chart here on, let's see if I can get my Zoom it going here. See if this will work on my screen share. If I go over here to this report, yeah, good, excellent. Okay, so if you see over here, so another technique that I use a lot is I use color a lot across the report. So the same data elements should be used across the report. So the yellow thing kind of makes sense to the yellow object over here. The red thing should make sense to the red title over here. So when you're building reports, you try to want to make sure that the different colors actually weave their way across the page. And if you have a different category, again, back to this chart here, we have bikes, components, and clothing over here. But on the bottom here, we actually have wheels, touring frames, and other things. The two colors are distinctly different. So you want to have a color palette. If you're going to use a color palette on something, right, and you're going to have a different contextual category value, some other data point, you know, in this case, it's like the frame or the product type versus the category type. You want to make those two colors very distinctly different. You don't want something yellow being in two areas where you don't need it. So again, another kind of technique that I use and try to leverage to this. Sometimes I'll use Q&A buttons. Recently, I haven't been using Q&A too much, but that's another option that you can do that. This is a setting that you can set up in the report and just double click on the pages of the report, and the Q&A button will show up there. You can ask questions of your data. So sometimes from an exploratory standpoint, this is an interesting way of having people use or author your reports. And then, oh, we won't do the sand dance thing. That thing's too much. And I think with that, I've talked clearly enough. Let me check my notes real quick here, and I will just jump over here to Seth. Talked about driving action, talked about knowing the audience, data stories. I think we've got it covered. I'll add one more note here. One last thing while Seth's getting going. One area of topic here that I think is important is to understand how do we decide what report is worthwhile for us to build. And so as a very last moment here, I'll say this is a challenge. And I would say what you can do, and especially when you're doing report building, there's likely too many requests for you to handle all of them all at once. And so what I would say is try to boil your decisions down to, is this report saving me money or is this report making me money? So if you can boil your decisions down to one of those two things, you can then really start looking at the spectrum of all the reports that you're going to build at your company and start really critically thinking through, okay, should I be really working on, you know, my cats report where I have all the pretty pictures of cats and funny videos from David Eldersveld and just make a really fun and interesting report? Or should I be spending more time on, you know, let's look at inventory, let's look at our QA, a quality assurance analysis. Maybe we can help them out with some reporting and save them some time. So if you can kind of gauge those under your report lens, it'll really help you decide on which reports you should be focusing on.
Yeah, I think that's that's a key point, Mike. Probably heard that from somebody really really engaged in that kind of stuff right now. You know, really, so where we've been is, you know the audience, right? When Mike and I were talking about how to develop this talk, you can get really into the weeds, and there's a lot more slides related to understanding which questions to ask. And I think the ultimate takeaway from, you know, the intro part of this is, what if you can key on what the actions of the end user are going to be after they view your report, or what they want to see in that report because they have decisions to make, you know you win, right? And I think what happens is a lot of the time, regardless of whether or not you're on the business side, but more so on the IT side, where there's sometimes layers of information being pumped through requests and different people handling what the end user wants. If they can't answer those key questions that you're asking them, then push on down the stream. And if it takes all the way going to the end user and saying, you know, hey, I'm here to help solve your problems. What does this report do for you to help you do your job easier? And ultimately, when we do that with our reports, we win.
Yeah.
So realistically, like I think the next focus of where we're going with this talk is how do we take and focus the attention of these users, right? Now we know our data sets. We've got all of the information that we need in terms of asking the right questions. We're going to be driving towards insights. How do we make things look good without spending several days doing it, right? I think in a lot of talks and a lot of the things that even we've been a part of and doing, we've been working with Power BI so long that what ends up happening is we show a lot of all of the really cool, neat things that you can do with Power BI, but those are like the finishing touches. So today, what we're going to walk through are just the very simple things that we do every single time we build a report. So what I'm going to show you is backgrounds and different ways you can create those, and what we want to do with them and what we don't want to do with them. Then we're going to move into one of our key phrases that we love, which is I'm going to mess it up too.
Don't mess it up.
Work like the business, think like IT.
Yeah.
So
yep.
The reason that's so applicable is themes, right? I want to create one theme because spending the time in that one spot allows me to prepare all future reports the same and get them to look the same way with one button click, and using tools to make our jobs easier. And that's one of the things that we've keyed on with Power BI.tips, and what we're doing with that site is to help every user, but predominantly the business user, build these reports in a simple and really effective way. So with that said, I think overall, like I said, we have our data, we understand what that looks like, and now it's time for building. So what I always like is pulling out some just egregiously horrible looking reports to reinforce my points. So we're gonna do that here, right? So one of the things is, as we're building out our report visuals, and I love groups, but not when I'm presenting things. So one of the things is like, I have data, I'm going to start dropping it on the canvas. And, what we're just going to look at some real simple data, so don't get too engrossed in that, because we're talking about fruit, and some people like fruit, but it's not that interesting. But the point is like, as we start building, this is where, if you do that flow of ideas that Mike talked about, you're in a much better position because you've already kind of whiteboarded and kind of figured out how you want the flow of a report to go and what you want things to look like in the specific visuals that you're building. If you don't do that, we see a lot of examples of people getting really engrossed in the specific visual because it's the first time they're interacting with their data on the report page, and they're investing a ton of time in, oh, that looks good, I'm going to use that. And then I'm going to add in another view of that data, and then another view of that data. And there's your donut, Mike.
Yeah, donuts.
And
Can you label that, please? I can't tell what it is. Can you label it?
This is where I was going to go with, the pie joke or the donut, where these fruits are great to eat, right? But not necessarily to look at. So what we have is we have these visuals, and we think they look great. And in fact, we've spent some time, and we understand that some of the newer releases of Power BI allow us to throw in these different shading right between the objects. And I, in the properties, as I was messing around with these, I'm looking, and I saw that, oh man, I can create a border. And you get lost in like all of these newfangled things that even for us sometimes pop up, and you kind of lose sight of where you're at on the report page. If I'm, really keyed in, and I'm like, okay, great, it's a white background, I'm going to utilize shapes, right? So I'm going to pop in some different shapes behind my visuals, and for the novice report user, or I should even say, people who have developed reports, I'm doing some really horrible things in here that are really distracting. And color, yeah, that really pops off the page, but alignment, the spacing between things, having the slicers, not centered on top of, the backgrounds. I have borders on some things and not borders on another. And this is a trap that even, we get caught into, where you have to do manual manipulation of all of the different visuals. And that's where a theme really helps out, because you don't forget to do one thing. A kind of a pet peeve in here that themes also help out with is if you're like me and you've been doing a ton of embedding in Power BI reports, the visual header is always on. But if you're embedding in an application, you need it to be really seamless and not have these, markers fly up everywhere you're going. So if you don't have a theme, you've got to go into every single one of these visuals and toggle it off because it defaults to on. And if you miss one, now all of a sudden, you're going to get a lot of tickets or people saying, hey, what's with this donut chart? Having this field, it doesn't do anything for me. It makes sense on the table if I had one. It makes sense on the table that I can, export or drill down or, see the different levels of a hierarchy, but it certainly doesn't in other areas. So let's say you've got all this stuff dialed in. You know that you can format and you can align all of these objects on a page. But the other thing that we find a lot is because you have this ability with a background, sometimes you choose the wrong background, right? And one of the most important things and why we started off this talk with data and the questions and the answers is realistically all of it should be focused on those things. Are you focusing the attention of the end user where you want it to be? And there's a whole talk on top of like, where do you place these visuals? The most important on the upper left. Do people, look left to right? In a kind of a Z pattern? Are there different ways you can have the focus go from the left to right in columns? So there's a lot of ways in which the science behind how people digest information is how you can learn or build better visualizations and reports. But one of the biggest mistakes I find is even if you do have the great spacing and the colors are even good and everything is aligned, if the background is too busy because you tried to make one of these really cool looking reports, oftentimes you get this where this, like I said, these are fun examples, but I'm making decisions for the visual background as opposed to decisions for enhancing what the report data should look like. So a simple background is much more effective in drawing in the attention, focusing people on their data and where you want them to be, and get rid of all of the distractions related around the alignment, spacing, sizing, colors, to just get rid of all of that. And really, ultimately, when we make the right choices in our background and in our visuals, we're allowing people to digest the information really quickly and efficiently. It reduces the strain. They love looking at your report as opposed to, trying to focus on the different elements and losing track of, and they're distracted by the report instead of innately just getting sucked into the data. So how do we build these backgrounds? Recently, or not too long ago.
Can I make a point on there, Seth? I think you made a really good point that I want to double emphasize here. You guys have power. Like, you guys, when you're building reports, you can be really sneaky here, right? You can smoke and mirrors a bit if you have a really good looking report. So I think don't underestimate the ability to make the report attractive looking, because that really draws your audience in and then wants them to engage more with the data and what's going on with the rest of the report. So a very stark, clean report may have its purpose, but if you can make it appealing and artfully done, again, you're blending the data and the art a little bit together, but you can really suck people in and get them really hooked on your report just by having a really good looking report too.
So how do we build backgrounds? A lot of times you can do this directly in the desktop. So all of these are just objects or shapes on a page. And all I've done is add in shadows and fills instead of a background. And what that fill action actually does instead of a background is you'll notice that if I'm going to change this to a background and leave that, to a 0 transparency, that the object goes all the way to the edge. What I found actually in doing this demo was, because I normally don't build report objects or backgrounds this way, is if you use the fill, you actually get this beveled edge, which I think adds a lot of depth and you get right out of the box. So now I have, these objects that are same size, same spacing. I have all of the simplistic implementation of a background, and none of the overhead of having to use a different tool to do that. The great thing about these is with all of your background, colors, everything changes, and you can change the background, and all of the beveling and all that just automatically works. If you're like Mike and I, you spend a lot of time in third-party tools. So for instance, here's an example of one of our scrims where it's just super light backgrounds, just as guides to where you would drop your visualization. But Illustrator, right? So the complex, development of a specific image that is designed with Power BI in mind is where we spend a ton of our time. Another tool that is available a lot to everybody is PowerPoint. I think with the advancements in the Power BI desktop and allowing you to do drop shadows on the actual objects within there, kind of alleviates the need in many cases to use PowerPoint. But this was another way in which people can build a background and then just save this as a PNG. And then finally, the final way is XD. So here's another example of a really simple interface where developing, kind of web app type images works really well. If you're going to use either one of XD or Illustrator, we've found that saving in a 2x actually gives a much better experience when you're importing that image into the background. And for those of you that are unfamiliar, the way you would import that image is just on a blank canvas page. You would add in the image from wherever it would be in your directory, and then bring the transparency down to 0 because it defaults to 100, and then that image shows up on the back. So the one I did show you is one of our scrims. So this comes out of Illustrator and was kind of meant to be a way in which we could implement the different kind of background images, but be really extensible. Right. So in some cases, if I want to drop some of these visualizations on the page, I can take these backgrounds and make them 0. And you'll see that I was messing around with my own report, applying themes. And instead of a swooping curve, I have a background that is now going to make these squares, right? So I can make 4 squares much in the same way that I did in my desktop, right? So I have the 4 squares, but you would never know that that my background image is this swooping thing. But if I want to have a little style on an image, it's a good way to focus attention in that regard. So PowerPoint, this is that same image. And the difference between something like this scrim and PowerPoint, or something that comes out of that saved image, is not necessarily the background, because we can change the background colors to anything that we want to in Power BI. Wow, that's a nice pink, isn't it, Mike? But the nice thing that the scrims allow us to do are add in gradients, right? So I get more depth of a change of color that adds subtle texture within the whole background itself, and it's not as stark a contrast. So that's why we usually play in the Illustrator XD realms, because we can have those different gradients, we can do different things with them to just kind of enhance the experience of the end user as they're interacting with the report.
And you can see what Seth's doing here. He's doing some interesting techniques I'd like to specifically call out on this one. If you notice, if you go back, I think it was back one page, Seth, when you didn't have all the visuals on there. Was it the, yeah, this one. You notice there's curved edges on all 4 segments. Yeah, different color, thanks. You notice there's curved edges on all 4 areas here. So what this is a really diverse background that we're using. And then this one's made in just straight up PowerPoint with just kind of unique colored design shapes here. But Seth, if you go over to like the finishing touches one, so one slide ahead, and then put with the graphics on there. So in this one, you can notice there's actually a couple different areas that he's using different elements here. The top two squares, he's actually using the background, and he's expanding that background all the way to the edges. And the things you can do with this is if you change the transparency of the background of one of the charts, you see it's still there. The image is still hidden behind the scenes. If you change the transparency of just the one visual background, you can start illuminating those little shaded corners and adding a little bit of flair to them, or you can like extend the experience of these shapes to enhance whatever you're looking at from the report. So it can still give you like a very clean looking report. And then I really, really like in these things a lot, the two features, I put some links in the chat window. I linked to Adobe Illustrator, Adobe XD, which is free, and then GIMP, which is a open source photo editing program. All of those you can kind of do very similar things, but in those programs, you have the ability of adding like a transparent background or putting a gradient across the background where the top left-hand corner is clear and transparent, and the bottom corner is shaded with some sort of transparency applied to it. And by using those transparent and gradient backgrounds, it allows us to then change the background color. And so now you can add a base color to your report just on the background page, and now you get these really interesting variations in color and shading and extra elements here too as well. So you can do these, you can use these things in a lot of different ways and be creative with it.
Yeah, and that's really what we've focused on over time, and as the tool has evolved as well, especially with themes, is as I apply a theme, or if I set a background, and I have that dialed in, now I have, images like this that will let the theme come through every single time. And I'm trying to be as inobtrusive as I can be with this initial image and just adding in a gradient or making it as extensible as possible. So overall, I prefer to use an Illustrator, or I would say even, PowerPoint or XD as a background image for mainly one reason. We'll call it a main reason and the other. One is I'm too anal to not have all the control, and I love the ability of creating really unique and interesting backgrounds. But predominantly, why I don't spend a ton of time in the desktop typically is I put a lot of elements on a page, and if you build objects on a page within Power BI Desktop, the report has to render every single one of these objects every time the report is generated. So if you think about it, not such a big deal when I only have 5, but if we see what even I do, but a lot of people do, is extend this type, and now my height on my report is 1400, and I have all of these images duplicated. Now I have 10, 20, 30 different objects that have to be rendered every single time the report is generated versus one single background image where I get the same feel. So
I also have an article around this as well. So I actually did a pretty in-depth demo around the performance of having many different just text boxes, not even data, something that's not even bound. I put 100 text boxes on a report page and tried to render the report and do the timings of the report. And it made a 300 to 400x. I can't remember exactly the number, but it's like in the hundreds per time effort for the report to render. Because when the report renders visuals, it renders things as a single thread. And every single visual element you put on the page requires that single thread to do something with it to get it on the page. So I'll put the performance article about performance and having too many visuals on the page in the link here.
Yeah. So that's backgrounds. So let's talk about how do we extend, the fonts. Well, predominantly colors, right? And we've mentioned themes a couple times, and this was another area that we like to think we prompted the team to put a little bit or invest a little bit more here. But we have a dialogue. So under View, most people I'm sure are familiar, but under View here, we have the dialog for themes where we have some pre-canned themes that we can pick. So as we choose these, my color themes change. We can browse for themes. So if we want to look at and pull themes from our own system, that's how we easily and quickly do that. The theme gallery. So by clicking that, we're taken to the Power BI community site where there's 132 different themes of reports. That is a lot.
That's Mike. A lot of themes.
Maybe if we had compared those against something later on. So So, people have generated reports. So if you want to see what they look like, and, clicking into each one of these allows us to understand like that part of this application was adding in this JSON theme. So we can download that. So for moving on, essentially that's where we can grab color themes and add them into our existing report. I will show you this. Most people may or may not be aware, but really a theme is just a JSON structure, right? And it's many, many properties, and I'll show you that in a second, of a JSON code structure that has all of the different various elements that are in the Power BI file that allow us to preset them if we import that theme. What we have directly out of the theme generator is, customize a current theme. That should go to the dialog where we have certain selections, right? But not everything. So what we'll see is as we're clicking on the text and visuals and the page and the name and colors, we can choose the different things within here to set, but we'll notice that these are a very small subset of what we actually have in the properties, especially for every single visual. So one of the things we can do is how to create a theme, right? So if we click out here, this is like the wrong spot, and I'll show you why in a second. So this would be the technical documentation on themes. And what you'll notice quickly is after the intro of the things that I just went through, what ends up happening is they show you how you can build your own theme. And I'll just keep talking while I scroll. Because essentially, these are all of the different properties that are encompassed in the JSON file or that you can interact with and preset. We've noticed, and we know, most business users and most users in general don't want to build their own custom themes. And what's fantastic about a new tool, right, or I should say themes in general, is this button click to how to create a theme takes you to a different site. And with the new external tools as of July, you now have the ability to go to somebody's theme gallery, ours, right, where we have, I think, over 3,000 different themes.
10,000 now. We're up to 10,000 different
10,
color themes. Yes.
So if you're in the market for looking at new ideas for colors, essentially you can click on this, and then we have a preloaded page where it'll show you what that theme looks like in a Power BI report. And we can download this. So now we have this exact JSON file that we can load up into our report. And I'll show you something really quick in just a moment. So here's the themes gallery. So if you're in the mood for colors, you can easily download them there. If you want to generate a more highly customized theme, Mike and I have spent an insane amount of time, and by Mike and I mean Mike, with some developers in developing our own tool. So there's, this is very familiar with the other one. We can add and choose our own colors in the color picker. But the other thing we can do is, just like the file that I just downloaded, we can grab these hex codes and very easily copy and paste those into our multiple outlet. And now we have all those color themes. All of these we can adjust, and this adjustment order is important, because this is how the main colors are going to start showing up on your visualizations and or background. And now we have a color theme, and we could download that if we wanted to, and that would be representative of what we could do out of the community or our gallery. However, where it gets really fun is the properties. So in here, we've developed a tool that allows you to basically have access to all of the properties that you would have within Power BI on all of the specific visualizations. So as you click through here, you'll notice that our properties windows change just like you would see in the visualizations pane in Power BI desktop, and allow you to modify and change all of those. One of the easiest things you can do right off the bat for any theme is pick your font and pick your font size and pick your
Comic
font
Sans
family.
S. What are you doing to me?
It's special just for you.
You're trying to make me have a conniption now.
Wingdings.
Wingdings. Yes,
it's
exactly.
an easily recognizable one. I'll do Arial Black. So now that we've got our palette, we've selected some of the things. What you'll notice is, as you're interacting, we highlight the blue for you, and we'll toggle this off because I don't like headers, and then we'll download this theme. So we're going to call this ResPug and download that. So now that we have that, I can go into my Power BI desktop and I can go back to my themes and I can import that theme that I just created. And when I do that, we'll notice that all of my theming, I didn't set a background, change to the first 8 colors of that, all of the hex codes I added. So what we've done is, obviously, all of my font is now 22 and bold Arial. And now I have that standardized theme that goes throughout the entire experience and makes things really, really easy and simple. I glossed over something in here really, really fast. The external tools, I'm going to ask Mike if you pop this into the chat window.
I did, just did right now.
There's a YouTube video that we did around a new tool we called Business Ops, which is kind of, if you think about it, an aggregator of all of these new external tools that we can add into the Power BI desktop. And we've included, obviously, ours for quick access to not only just the themes gallery and themes generation, but if you want to check out our layouts or scrims, or like the scrim that I was just demoing today, some of these help keep the lights on, but some of them are also free. This one you can download in a 16:9 format. A lot of the others have 2 different formats, which is like kind of the short and long versions of those. But now you're a click away from these tools, and also shameless plug, check out the hot swap connections along with these different things. But in those links, those are talks in and of themselves. We've just recently done a few of those, but as it relates to look, feel, and making your reports pop and look fantastic, backgrounds and themes are the 2 ways to do that, and you can do it very easily and simply in every single report that you have.
And if you ever have, so I've sent all the links out there. If you go play with the tools, see if you like them. If you have any ideas, the tools have information in them. We're coming out hopefully this week with another big release of beta of the Business Ops tool, where we'll have another hopefully 4 to 5 additional external tools added to this. And so if anyone else who's in the part of the community wants to make an external tool, Reza, if you'd like to add more Business Ops tools, please reach out. We have the installer. We can get your tools integrated into desktop easily and make that a very seamless experience for you building reports and developing, making your daily life easier with Power BI. So external tools are amazing, and we're super excited about them.
So for sure. One thing I'll just briefly touch on. Obviously, once you have the foundations of backgrounds and themes, we can do a ton of other things related to how do you interact with those reports using buttons and flyouts and different interactions. If you're interested in that, I think we've done a bunch of different talks, but there's tons of different ways you can add in additional things, related to that. So like information button that just navigates to a separate page, or you can do this on top of the page. You can change the tooltip experience, right? So instead of, the default on a bar, you get, the tooltip that you're generating based on your own page. All of these things we've spent a considerable amount of time in and developed layouts is what we call them. And those are kind of a fully functioning button clicking, hover action, all of the, the whole 9 yards kind of experience that you'll also find on our website under our tools. The vast majority of all of those are free for use, and we hope that you start using them and get a lot of use out of them to make great looking reports.
So I know that we're out of time. If anyone needs to jump, I know that we can. I did catalog all the questions that came through. So if you want, I can throw them up on the screen here real quick, and we can kind of rapid fire our way through the questions here to the end of the hour. So Fernando asks, the companies, what kind of suggestions do you have around bookmarks? That's maybe Seth for one for you.
There's some, name them properly, understand what all of the properties underneath them do, because in order to in order to get the appropriate action that you're expecting, you need to really understand what those things are going to do for you. A common problem right out of the gate with bookmarks is people leave all of those checked, and you really mess up your context of your filter
That's a really
settings.
good point. Yep.
And what happens is you'll preset a bunch of filters on a report to get the visuals to present the way you want, and then you won't update the bookmark. And when somebody uses a clear bookmark or moves to a different page, you're actually going to reset the filter context to whatever it was in the bookmark. So you're snapshotting, in some cases, both the data and the visual state. So I would say understand the properties and name them really well are the two biggest things that will ease that experience.
And on my screen, I'm showing all the properties of the bookmark: data, display, current page, and all visuals. I very rarely ever use all visuals. I almost always use selected visuals. And I would highly recommend play with groups and bookmarks, because you can make a bookmark for a group. And if you do that, any element you add to the group will automatically be applied to the bookmark. So if you're trying to hide and show multiple elements at one time, put all your elements in a group and then hide and show that group all together with the bookmarks. Great question. Next question. Could you talk about having...
I think we can get you guys to do a session on bookmark as well later on.
we should do one just on bookmarking. Can you talk about an executive sponsor? Just how about having an executive sponsor? I'll start this one off. I think executive sponsors are awesome, and they definitely really help drive your business case. You're going to have a lot of, I think, my feeling is you're going to have a lot of up and downs in the projects that you're going to work on, and you need someone who's going to always be believing in your capabilities of your team as the executive sponsor. You need someone who's going to buy into and continue to remove roadblocks and push the project forward. I can't tell you how many times you're going to be challenged with other teams trying to bring other visualizations tool in, or other projects, or just kind of derailing you. And I think an executive sponsor really can help focus the team and really give a voice to what you're doing as an analytical department. This really helps when you're trying to grassroots this experience. What I find a lot when I talk with businesses, there's a couple teams that have a really good vision for what they want to do, either reporting with analytics and BI and things, but sometimes the culture of the company isn't aligned in all of the business units. And so you have a lot of companies where you come in and it's a disparate source. They've got Tableau over here, Click is over there, we have Power BI over here, and that executive sponsor can really help carve out good business case examples, prove why you're saving money and adding value and time to your projects, and it can really help you weed out, not working on things that are, to our point earlier, is this report saving time, or is this report saving money, or is this report making me money, right? He can really help you refine that information down so that you're actually making valuable reports.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that one, Seth?
Yeah, I'll just interject, right? But that last thing that we talked about, are you saving or making, right? And if you can do one of those and show that executive sponsor that the outcomes of your report will lead him in that direction, or should do that for him, that is a huge win. The other thing is if you're trying to convince somebody of something, you can take this presentation, right, and just focus on that one individual and build the best report that it makes things simple for them, and that in many cases will win them over. I mean, a lot of times we get caught in the politics of trying to figure out how you sway, and I'm not saying that those aren't there, but bar none, we have had so much experience, and I continue to experience the same thing of a lot of just passing data around. A lot of I have to go figure things out for myself, or nobody really doing showcasing clear, well thought out stories that could potentially shape the business or make a big impact. And if you can make a big impact and show that, you win. I keep saying, well, you win, but ultimately, that's why I think everybody who loves data, everybody who gets into Power BI, and why you're watching this, right? Like, the whole point is we get excited about the possibilities of what we can do with a massive amount of data, analyzing it and presenting it in a way that has the potential to shape business. And if that's one person or an entire division, it happens. And when it's done well, that's when businesses really knock down the doors and are operating at peak efficiency and make the best decisions. So
another great, I guess this is a comment / question, data culture bottomed up versus a viz, or maybe bottom versus top up. I want to point out an article here that's written by Matthew Roach from the Microsoft team. I think this is probably the best articulated answer around what does bottom up versus top down approach look like from a BI perspective.
Yeah.
This is just brilliant in my mind. I think this was a slide that was actually used in a Microsoft deck at some point. But if you think about this pyramid here, at the bottom of the pyramid, we have personal reporting, people just doing things in their own space on Excel, whatever I want. I have full control of whatever I need. And then at the top, you get more towards the EDW, the enterprise data warehouse, tighter controls, more rigid data structures. And so being a part of the person who's been involved in projects at the looser control level, and now leading projects where we're at the tightest end, I'm at the EDW level now as well. You have to see there's definitely a trade-off that goes along with this, right? I have full flexibility. I can move really fast and do what I want to do at the personal and project reporting level. But the higher up that pyramid I go, the data gets larger. The machines get more expensive. We need more people engaged to agree upon the same structure of data. And so I think this is a really good representation of, is it top down or bottom up? I'd like to say it'd be a good hybrid approach where you have some people in the business leading the insights and leading what we need to build and develop. And then you have the IT in the top organization coming down and meeting them halfway and saying, hey, what are you building? How can we help you build it? And how can we enable you to move faster? I'm a firm believer that the business understands what they want to make money for the company. And you want them running in front of the IT group to kind of help shape what does the data model look like? What data do I need? Which are the data sources? How do I blend those data sources? Because they understand it. And the sooner we can engage them and add them to what we're doing in IT already with the EDW, the big enterprisey things, the better the whole organization would be. So you really do need it from both sides.
Yeah. And Mike and I are spending a lot of thought time in between, right? Like Power BI realistically opens a lot of doors that kind of break down that red line. If that red line is the division between business and IT.
Yes.
Just because of by nature the type of tool that it is. Reza, we're fine to keep answering questions. Cut us off whenever you want. We usually end up talking.
No, that's all good. Just to be conscious of people's time, because lunchtime probably is over for many of them want to go back to the work. If you can wrap it up in like 5 minutes, that would be fantastic.
Right. I think we only have like 2 or 3 more questions in here, and then I think we're all done. Can you please comment about self-service BI or great? I think so I'm going to kind of lean on that one. That's kind of the same answer: self-service BI or enterprise BI. I would point back to that article from Matthew Roach. I actually will put that in the chat window so you have it, so you can kind of read it on your own. Great, insightful article. I really liked it. Question from Ganesh. Will we get CSS support in Power BI to standardize our colors by data values? I think this is a great idea, and I don't know if it's on the Power BI's team roadmap, but what I would say is go to ideas.powerbi.com and explain your idea there and go look for it. I'll put that link in the window as well. What I think you're referring to is binding data colors to values of your data set. Like the US will be always colored blue. Mexico would be green, or whatever you want to color it, and you could have very consistent. So every time that value shows up anywhere in your report, that same value could be color coded, so it's the same everywhere you go. So I think that's a great idea. I don't think it's in the product today at this point in time, but your votes can help and can really push that along forward. So go to ideas.powerbi.com, please vote on it, and voice your opinion about what you want the product team to develop. Last one, David. How about cultural? Reading from left to right, or when the language is changed? So I'll be admitted here, I'm not the expert on languages and what is it, perspectives? Is it? I don't remember the exact phrase.
Yeah, I think that I've seen this type of conversation because it doesn't work right now, right? There's certain,
Yeah,
like
yes.
you can do language translation, but I don't think they've gotten it to the reading in different patterns, right?
So what I would say is I do a lot of my reporting in the US, so I haven't done a lot of international projects. So most of my stuff really focuses on studies that I've heard from the US. Read left to right, left side of the screen, all the way across the right. The upper left-hand quadrant of your report is the most important. And as you work yourself down to the bottom right-hand side, that becomes like where you want to put your tables and your detailed information. So start very generic, high-level KPIs at the top of your report, and then work to more detailed towards the bottom.
Yeah, I think this is actually a text question. The text itself, like changing pattern. Reza, do you have any input on that? I'm fairly certain, yes, that's still a problem. No, it doesn't do it.
I think David's question goes back to the place that you explained those layouts, that you had like a big bar in the left-hand side and those like 4 different blocks in the main area. So something probably like when we switch the language, can we switch it into the right-hand side, things like that. We probably don't have it now.
Not that dynamic.
So what I would say this is, so we have these things called scrims, and I put the link out here earlier. A scrim, we try to go full bore creative mode on these scrim things. So what you'll see, scrims are basically a very fancy background for your Power BI report, and we do bars on the left, bars on the right, bars at the top, bars at the bottom. And if you look at some of the example of the scrims that we have on the website, we try and make them very diverse and think of every kind of common pattern we can think of, so you can get the most value out of these background images.
I would say we're always open for feedback. I mean, if you don't see enough of something and you have patterns that we may not have experience with, let
us know.
But yeah, by all means, we'd love to throw some of those out there, because I'm sure you're not the only one.
Thank you.
If you have stuff you want us to put on the site, send it to us. Send us an email. Send us we'll be more than happy to promote scrims and things that you guys do already. We have a great marketplace that is a bunch of free stuff, and some of it's paid at the store level. But if you have ideas for scrims or backgrounds or layouts or things like that you want to promote to the community, please reach out to us. You can reach out to support@powerbi.tips. We monitor that email address, and I'll just put that in the window here. Feel free to email us.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Mike and Seth. Fantastic presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone who joined as well. It was great to have you all here, and hopefully enjoy the rest of your day, your evening, your afternoon, morning.
Have a great weekend, guys. I got a whole other day to work.
Yeah, right.
Must be nice living in the future, you guys.
Cheers.
Take care.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you, guys.